It was a cold winter night, and the small town of Kelligan was wrapped in a silent tranquility, broken only by the occasional sound of hurried footsteps on the paved streets. The lights of the local library shone softly, casting a warm glow that contrasted with the biting wind outside. The Kelligan Library was a refuge of knowledge and peace for the residents, a place where ancient stories mingled with the promise of new worlds waiting to be explored. Among the tall shelves and the welcoming scent of old books, the librarian, Margot, was finishing up organizing the volumes that had been returned that day. Margot was a middle-aged woman, with graying hair tied in a loose bun and eyes that seemed to have read more stories than anyone could imagine. Her love for books was palpable, and she took pride in keeping the library in perfect order, being known for her dedication and care for the library's patrons. As the night wore on, Margot felt a growing unease, something she couldn't quite explain. She looked out the window into the darkness outside, the wind howling as if whispering a warning. Ignoring the discomfort, Margot returned to her work, but the feeling that something was about to happen lingered. Amid this calm environment, the town harbored an old secret, a mysterious bond between the library and a silent, watchful creature that lived in the surrounding forests. An owl, with large eyes and feathers as white as snow, had a habit of visiting the library at night. To many, it was just a shadow in the trees, but to Margot, the owl was more than that. It was a symbol of wisdom and protection, a silent guardian watching over the stories contained within those books. The clock struck almost midnight when Margot heard a crackling sound coming from the downstairs. She frowned, hesitating. The library should have been empty, and that sound was unusual, especially at that hour. Cautiously, she descended the stairs leading to the basement, where the oldest books were stored. The darkness was deep, but her footsteps echoed firmly off the stone walls. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, Margot caught a strange scent, an acrid odor that spread through the air, mingling with the musty smell of the old books. She turned on the light and, to her horror, saw a spark glowing in the corner of one of the shelves. A spark that, within seconds, turned into a small flame. Panic gripped Margot. She rushed to extinguish the fire, but the flame seemed to have a life of its own, quickly spreading among the old, fragile books. The flames, voracious, began to devour the stories accumulated over centuries. Desperate, Margot tried to smother the fire with a cloth, but the fire seemed to grow with uncontrollable fury. Her mind raced, searching for a solution, but fear began to cloud her judgment. Then, a soft rhythmic sound broke through the chaos, the beating of wings. Margot looked up, and through a small window high on the wall, she saw the owl. Its piercing eyes watched her, and for a moment, it seemed as if time had stopped. The owl's gaze was calming, almost as if it were trying to convey a silent message. The owl, with an elegant movement, glided through the window and entered the library. It landed on the stair railing, observing the fire with a serene and determined posture. Margot, not understanding how, felt a wave of calm wash over her. It was as if that presence had reminded her of something essential she was about to forget. With her heart still racing but her mind clearer, Margot realized she needed help. She ran to the phone and called the fire department, reporting the fire. While she waited, she turned her attention back to the owl, which remained still, looking directly at the flames as if trying to contain the fire's fury with its mere presence. The owl seemed to know exactly what it was doing there. As the flames spread, its eyes, shining like the moon, seemed to guide Margot. And despite the gravity of the situation, the owl's presence brought an inexplicable hope, as if that night, though terrifying, was just the beginning of something much greater. Margot didn't know what was coming, but one thing was certain: that owl was no ordinary visitor. The library was in danger, but with the owl's arrival, something deeper and more significant had been awakened, something that would change Margot's life and the lives of all the residents of Kelligan forever. The fire truck siren cut through the silent night as Margot stood frozen, watching the flames spread through the ancient corridors of the library. The owl remained there, motionless, observing every movement with its mesmerizing eyes. The calm it exuded to Margot was both comforting and enigmatic, as if it were there to guide her through the chaos. The firefighters arrived quickly, but the situation was far from under control. The fire, fueled by the old books and the dry basement environment, spread with terrifying ferocity. Margot, anguished, watched as the firefighters worked frantically to contain the flames. They used powerful hoses, but the fire seemed to have a life of its own, advancing relentlessly through the shelves and consuming pages that had withstood the test of time for generations. Meanwhile, the owl continued to watch from its perch, showing no signs of fear or restlessness. For Margot, the owl's presence was an emotional anchor amidst the turmoil. She found herself unable to look away from the bird, as if its serenity held an ancient wisdom that was somehow related to what was happening. The firefighters, despite their experience, seemed powerless against the intensity of the blaze. The flames reached the upper floors, threatening to consume the entire structure. Margot, helpless, felt tears stream down her face as she thought of all the stories being destroyed. Each lost book was a memory, a piece of history disappearing forever. The pain of seeing her beloved library engulfed in flames was almost unbearable. Yet, amid the despair, something peculiar happened. The owl, which had remained silent until then, let out a low sound, almost like a call. Margot looked at the bird, confused, but then realized that the owl was trying to draw her attention to something. Following the owl's gaze, Margot saw a small door at the back of the basement, a door she rarely used, but which led to a secret room where the library's oldest and rarest books were kept, a treasure that represented the essence of Kelligan's history. With her heart racing, Margot ran to the door. The flames were dangerously close, but she couldn't let those precious volumes be destroyed. The small room was protected by thick stone walls, but the fire was spreading quickly, and there was no time to lose. As Margot struggled to open the door, the owl flew down to her, landing on the floor beside her. The bird watched her closely, as if encouraging Margot to continue despite the suffocating heat and the smoke that was beginning to spread through the area. Finally, Margot managed to unlock the door and entered the room, where solid wood shelves held the ancient books. The volumes stored there were irreplaceable, some dating back centuries, carrying the wisdom of times long past. Margot knew she couldn't save all the books, but she grabbed as many as she could carry. With trembling hands and a heavy heart, she made several quick trips, carrying the books out of the room where the firefighters had finally reached the area and started to bring the fire under control. The owl, throughout the entire ordeal, remained by Margot's side, like a silent but protective shadow. And with each book saved, Margot felt she was not only preserving a piece of history but also responding to a deeper call, something that transcended the mere act of saving material objects. When the firefighters finally declared the fire under control, the relief was palpable. The flames had destroyed much of the library, but the secret room, protected by Margot's courage and determination, and, in a way, by the owl's guidance, remained intact. As Margot looked at the damaged library, she felt a mix of sadness and gratitude. She had lost so much, but she had also saved something of immeasurable value, and the presence of the owl, now calmly perched on one of the remaining shelves, seemed to remind Margot that even in the midst of loss, there was always something to protect and preserve. The firefighters began to leave, leaving Margot alone with the owl in the partially destroyed library. Silence returned, but it was a different kind of silence, filled with meaning. Margot knew that that night had been a turning point, not just for the library, but for her own life. And somehow, she felt that the owl was there to show her the way forward, even if the destination was uncertain. Gradually, Margot began organizing the books she had managed to save. Each volume was placed carefully on a table, as if they were sacred relics. The owl, now closer than ever, watched each movement, as if ensuring that Margot's work was completed successfully. Margot looked at the owl and, in an almost inaudible whisper, thanked it. She knew that the creature had been more than just a mere observer. The owl had been her ally, a silent guide in a moment of deep crisis. And now, with the library in ruins, Margot knew her mission was not over. She would have to rebuild, not just the walls and shelves, but also the spirit of that very special place. The days that followed were marked by a renewed energy in Kelligan. The tragedy of the fire, which initially seemed like a devastating blow, had turned into a catalyst for something extraordinary. With Margot's leadership and the unwavering support of the community, the reconstruction of the library progressed quickly. But the new library would not just be a replica of the old one. It would be a symbol of resilience, hope, and the power of unity. Every detail of the reconstruction was planned with care and love. Margot, with the owl's feather always nearby, led the project with an almost superhuman dedication. She oversaw the selection of materials, the new shelves that would house the books, and even the selection of new works that would become part of the collection. The new library would be a place where the past and the future would meet, a space that would honor the old stories while embracing the new narratives yet to be written. The residents of Kelligan actively participated in the reconstruction. Children helped paint the walls, local artists decorated the interior with murals inspired by the region's legends and stories, and the elders contributed memories and tales that would be preserved for future generations. It was a collective effort, a true example of how a community could come together in times of adversity. The owl, now considered a kind of spiritual guardian of the library, continued to appear, silently watching the progress. For many, the bird's presence was a sign that they were on the right path, a confirmation that the library was being rebuilt not just physically, but also in spirit. Margot, in particular, felt an even stronger connection with the owl, as if the bird was constantly guiding her steps. As time passed, the new library began to take shape. The building, more modern and spacious, was a harmonious blend of tradition and innovation. The new wide windows let in plenty of natural light, creating a welcoming and inspiring environment. At the center of the library, in a place of honor, was the glass case containing the owl's feather, a constant reminder of the strength and wisdom that had guided everyone in the process. Finally, the grand opening day arrived. The entire town gathered to celebrate the completion of the project. Margot, filled with emotion, gave a heartfelt speech, thanking everyone for their support and dedication. She spoke about how the library was not just a place to store books, but a space where lives were transformed, where people found solace, inspiration, and wisdom. And above all, Margot highlighted the importance of the owl, which had appeared in the moment of greatest need, bringing a message of hope and resilience. After the speech, the doors of the new library were opened to the public. People entered, marveling at the new space, but also moved by the story that the place now carried. Children ran to the shelves, while the elders walked the corridors with nostalgia and reverence. Everyone felt that the new library was more than just a building. It was a monument to the human capacity to overcome adversity and create something beautiful out of pain. Margot, for her part, watched everything with a mixture of pride and humility. She knew that this moment was not just the end of a project, but the beginning of something much larger. The library was being reborn, and with it, the entire town of Kelligan. And as she watched people exploring the new space, Margot felt a presence beside her. She turned and once again saw the owl, perched on one of the highest shelves. The owl seemed content, as if it knew its mission there was nearly complete. Margot smiled, feeling a deep gratitude for the creature that had appeared in her moment of greatest despair. She knew that the owl had been more than just a mere observer. It had been a guide, a protector, and, in a way, the spiritual heart of the new library. As the hours passed, the opening celebration continued, and the new library quickly became the center of attention. People chatted animatedly, shared stories, and made plans for the future of the space. Margot, exhausted but happy, retreated to a quiet corner of the library, where she could reflect in silence on everything that had happened. And it was there, in that moment of stillness, that Margot noticed something extraordinary. As she looked at the owl's feather, now carefully displayed in the center of the library, she saw a soft, almost imperceptible glow emanating from the object. It was as if the feather were alive, radiating an energy that seemed to fill the entire space around it. Margot felt a wave of emotions wash over her: joy, gratitude, and a deep sense of fulfillment. She knew, without a doubt, that the owl had left more than just a feather. It had left a legacy, a presence that would continue to inspire and protect the library and all who frequented it. The owl, now watching from afar, seemed ready to depart. Margot watched it with tenderness and, in her heart, made a silent promise to honor everything the bird had done for her and for Kelligan. And as the owl took flight, slowly disappearing over the horizon, Margot knew that even if she never saw it again, the owl's presence would always be with her, guiding and protecting. The new Kelligan library was finally complete, and with it, a new chapter in the town's life had begun. Margot knew there was much work to be done, but she also knew she was ready to face any challenge that came. With the owl in her heart and the shining feather as a symbol of everything that had been overcome, Margot was confident that the library would continue to be a beacon of light and wisdom for many generations. In the days and weeks that followed the grand opening of the new library, Kelligan experienced a quiet yet profound transformation. The library, now revitalized and full of life, became more than just a repository of books. It was the beating heart of the community. People of all ages came from far and wide to see the space, hear the stories, and connect with the legacy that had been created there. The owl's feather, carefully displayed at the center, became a symbol of rebirth and resilience, a constant reminder of what the community had overcome and the power that everyone held when they united around a common purpose. Margot continued to fulfill her role as the library's guardian, but something within her had changed. She now carried a quiet wisdom, a serene confidence that came from the experience of facing the fire and emerging stronger. Her workdays were filled with new energy, a joy that emanated from seeing the library flourish once again. Margot knew that the owl had been a gift, a guide that had helped her find her way through the chaos, and that now, even though distant, the bird's presence continued to influence every corner of that place. Over time, stories about the owl and its feather began to spread. Visitors came from other towns not only to admire the new library, but also to hear about the owl that had appeared on the night of the fire. The story took on a life of its own, inspiring tales and legends, and soon the owl became an icon of the town, a nearly mythical figure that represented wisdom and protection. But for Margot, the true lesson of the owl went beyond the legend. She understood that the bird's presence, while extraordinary, was also a reminder of the strength that everyone possessed within themselves. The ability to face the unknown, to find solutions in moments of despair, and to rebuild what was lost with a renewed spirit. The library, with its shelves full of old and new stories, was a living testimony to this truth. Margot also noticed something curious happening with the library's visitors. People seemed more connected, more willing to share their own stories and to get involved in the community's activities. It was as if the fire and the subsequent rebuilding had awakened a new sense of belonging and collective responsibility. Reading groups grew, new projects to preserve local stories emerged, and children, inspired by the story of the owl, began writing their own tales, many of which imagined adventures with the wise bird that had saved the library. And so, the Kelligan Library became not just a place of knowledge, but also one of personal and collective transformation. Every visitor who walked through its doors left a little different, a little more inspired, carrying with them a part of the energy that seemed to emanate from the owl's feather. One quiet afternoon, months after the opening, Margot was sitting at her desk, organizing some newly arrived books. The sun was setting, casting a golden light through the library's wide windows. Everything was at peace, and the library, in its new splendor, seemed to breathe along with the town, a living entity reflecting the spirit of Kelligan. Suddenly, Margot heard a familiar sound, the soft beating of wings. She looked up and, through the window, saw the owl perched on a tree outside. Its eyes gleamed with that ancient wisdom, and Margot felt a warm comfort in her chest. She smiled, understanding that the owl was there to remind her that, even in the greatest trials, there was always a way back to the light. The owl watched Margot for a long moment, as if it wanted to make sure that everything was well. Then, with a gentle flap of its wings, it took flight, disappearing slowly into the horizon. Margot followed it with her eyes until the bird was out of sight, feeling a deep gratitude for everything that had happened. She knew that, although the owl might not return again, its presence would continue to live on in the library and in the heart of every person who crossed those doors. The shining feather, carefully preserved, would continue to inspire all who saw it, an eternal symbol of hope, courage, and the ability to turn adversity into opportunity. As night fell over Kelligan, the library remained illuminated, a beacon of knowledge and wisdom in the darkness. And inside, the stories continued to be told, inspired by that night when the owl appeared and, with its simple presence, forever changed the destiny of an entire town. Margot, now at peace, knew that her work was only beginning. With the owl in her heart and the feather as a constant reminder, she was ready to continue writing the next chapter of Kelligan's story, a story of overcoming, of love for knowledge, and of a community that, guided by a mysterious owl, found its true strength.